We'll start. So CNS, you have started with CNS, isn't it? So we'll start with meningitis, and meningitis, today's topic is bacterial meningitis, okay? So few things, learning objectives from this topic is the causative organisms or the causative agents of acute and chronic bacterial meningitis, okay? Then for each organism, you should know what are the pathogenesis, clinical manifestations, certain lab diagnosis for each type of organism, treatment of acute and chronic meningitis, bacterial meningitis especially, okay? So what is meningitis? Itis. When there is itis is added, what does it mean? Inflammation. So in inflammation, what are the signs of inflammation? There are 5 signs in pathology they have taught you, isn't it? What are those? Calor, rubor, dolor, tumor, loss of function. Okay. So meningitis is inflammation of leptomeninges that is caused because of the infection. Okay. So surrounding the brain, spinal cord, and the subarachnoid space also will be involved. Okay, so several pathogens are involved in meningitis. It can be bacterial meningitis, it can be parasitic, it can be fungal, it can be viral as well. Okay, so first thing first, you have to differentiate what is the causative organism, whether it is bacterial, viral, fungal, or parasitic. So bacterial meningitis, we otherwise call it as, anybody knows? If bacteria is involved, what do we call it as? Pyogenic. Okay, so we can otherwise call bacterial meningitis as pyogenic meningitis, which holds the highest global burden in meningitis. Okay, so first is your acute bacterial meningitis. So in medicine, I think you're already taught what is acute and what is chronic. So what is acute? If it is within what span of time? How many days? How many weeks? And chronic? Less than 6 weeks. Okay. And chronic is more than? Okay. So, like I told you, acute bacterial meningitis is otherwise called as pyogenic meningitis. Okay, it is acute and purulent infection of the subarachnoid space. So how do we say it is your acute bacterial infection or pyogenic infection? First, what should be your choice of sample for meningitis? CSF, very good. Wherever is the point of infection, that should be your choice of sample, like I told you. So first preference is CSF. Once we get the CSF, what do we do? What is the first thing we do? We do gram staining to find out what is there in the CSF. So, because it is bacterial, you will see elevated polymorphonuclear cells in the CSF, okay, which is not a normal constituent in the CSF. So, according to the age group, we have certain organisms which is more prevalent in certain age group. Okay, so these are the common organisms. Among this, Streptococcus pneumoniae is the most common etiological agent for pyogenic bacterial meningitis. Okay, rest all are meningococci, then Streptococcus agalactiae, Listeria is there. Okay, and then Haemophilus influenza is also there. So Streptococcus agalactiae is one of the most common etiological agent in neonatal pyogenic meningitis. Okay, along with that, there are gram-negative bacilli like Escherichia coli, and then Klebsiella. Then you have Listeria monocytogenes, and in elderly, the most common etiological agent is Streptococcus agalactiae and Listeria monocytogenes. So why you need to know which are the most common organism or the etiological agent in certain age group? So that it is easier for you to diagnose. So when a case of suspected pyogenic meningitis comes to you, first thing first, you ask his patient's demography. Demography mein, what do you ask? Not that the patient's name and age, obviously the hospital ID is very important for us to identify the sample, but then again the age and the gender always plays a huge role in diagnosing certain diseases. Okay, so if it is a case of neonatal pyogenic meningitis. You know that you do have to first think about Streptococcus agalactiae. Okay, so and again, when you do the direct gram staining of the CSF, you do see the causative organism morphology along with the polymorphonuclear cells. Like if it is Streptococcus agalactiae, what do you think you will see? It will be, what is it in gram stain? Streptococcus. Streptococcus is what? Gram positive cocci, and it will be arranged in short chains. Okay, suppose you don't find gram positive cocci in your slide, you see only polymorphonuclear cells, along with that there is gram negative bacilli. So what do you have to think? It might be Escherichia coli, it might be Klebsiella pneumoniae. Okay, so pathogenesis. So generally it is transmitted from man to man through droplet respiratory secretions. Okay, can you appreciate the size of the droplet nuclei? Okay, so smaller it is, easier it is for the spreading. Can you see the bigger droplet nuclei? Actually after certain distance it goes down, it sediments down. So smaller it is, easier it is for spreading. Okay, so one of the disease which is transmitted because of respiratory droplet nuclei, one of the diseases in respiratory system. It plays a huge role, highest prevalent in India, tuberculosis. Very good. And other than this droplet nuclei, close and prolonged contact like sneezing, coughing on someone or kissing, this can be also one of the reason of spreading of the disease. Okay. So what are the routes of infection? One, it can be hematogenous spread. Next is direct spread from the infected site. Okay, then the third one is anatomical defect in the central nervous system. You might have covered it during your anatomy classes. Yes. Then next, what are the predisposing factors? I told you neonates have the highest prevalence factor. Light off corridor. Light. You know. Bas. So what do? We vaccinate. Widespread of vaccination, actually because of that we have seen reduction in the incidence of the pyogenic meningitis. Okay, then the other factor that promotes the infection is by respiratory tract as the primal portal of entry. Okay. Then other predisposing factors are like presence of CSF shunt and breach in the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so clinical manifestation there, first thing first you have to see is the incubation period. So what is incubation period? What do you mean by that? What is incubation period? How do we define incubation period? Okay, we have started system months back. You should know now. From the entry of the pathogen to the development of the first signs or symptoms. Okay, so your incubation period is generally, average incubation period is 2 to 10 days. Okay, so the classical triad of your meningitis is fever, headache, vomiting. Okay, along with that, in certain cases you will see photophobia. What is photophobia? Huh? Okay, very good. And then you can see in some cases altered consciousness. Okay, so in signs, meningism signs you have to know is nuchal rigidity, that is neck stiffness, then Kernic's sign and Brudzinski's sign. Can you see? Okay, let's move to the laboratory diagnosis. Like I told you, your choice of sample will be CSF. How do you collect the CSF? You do lumbar puncture with aseptic precaution. You have to always remember aseptic precaution. After taking the CSF sample, you have to collect it in 3 sterile container. Okay, so one goes for your cell count of the CSF, the other one goes for the biochemical analysis, and the last one goes to the bacteriological examination. So out of these 3, which one should be the most sterile sample out of these 3? Of course, all the 3 samples should be sterile. Huh? Biochemical. Which one should be more sterile? He said biochemical. Anybody else wants to second that? Bacteriological. Anybody wants? Anybody wants to say anything else? What cell count? So the most sterile one should be bacteriological examination. Okay, because there is hematogenous spread, of course, in cases you can take blood culture samples also. Okay. Always remember, the CSF sample which you collect in cases of meningitis or any CSF samples should never be refrigerated. Why it should never be refrigerated? We have taught you in sample storage and collection class. Who can tell me the answer? Huh? So generally in any samples we do refrigerate it if there is delay in the transport. But in CSF especially, if there is delay, if we cannot examine the sample, we have to refrigerate it. We cannot refrigerate it, actually we have to incubate the sample. Why? Why? Because of what? Delicate pathogens. Okay, what are the example of those? You're correct, but what is the example? Full name. Haemophilus influenzae, meningococci, streptococcus pneumoniae, all those might be destroyed, okay? But for molecular diagnosis, of course you can refrigerate and you can freeze the sample if it is only for molecular diagnosis, okay? Let me tell you, if it is for bacteriological, you will never refrigerate the sample at all, okay? Only for molecular. So, I told you we collect 3 vials for CSF. One is for cell count. This biochemical test has to be done for you to differentiate whether it is pyogenic, whether it is tubercular, or whether it is viral meningitis. It is very important. This difference is most frequently asked question from meningitis. Okay, first thing first, we will see the pressure. The normal pressure is 50 to 150. In pyogenic meningitis, it is highly elevated. It goes beyond 180. Generally, in tubercular meningitis, it is moderately elevated, and in viral meningitis, it is slightly elevated, or in certain cases, it might be normal also. Okay. Then next, for leukocyte count, what do you think in bacterial meningitis it will be? Will it be elevated? Yes, it will be highly elevated in pyogenic meningitis. Okay, it will be from 100 to 10,000. In tubercular, it will be slightly elevated, 10 to 500, and in viral, it is little bit higher, 25 to 500. Okay. So next is your predominant cells. Generally, in normal individual, you do see lymphocytes, lots of lymphocytes. Only in pyogenic, you will see lots of neutrophil. In again tubercular and viral meningitis, the predominant cells will be lymphocyte. Okay, glucose will be slightly decreased or might be absent in case of pyogenic meningitis. In tubercular meningitis as well, it will be slightly decreased, but in viral meningitis, it will be in normal range. Okay, then total proteins are markedly increased in case of pyogenic meningitis. It is moderately to markedly increased in cases of tubercular meningitis, and it is normal or slightly increased in cases of viral meningitis. This difference is very, very important for us to narrow down the causative organism, and this difference is very important for you as well. It comes very frequently in the exam. Okay, so I told you about the causative organisms of acute pyogenic meningitis. So these are the characters, gram staining characters. So for streptococcus pneumonia, how it will be? It is, at least tell me the gram staining, what it is? It is gram-positive cocci. How it looks like? One special shape we call it. What is it called? Huh? Very good. Lanceolate shape. How does a lanceolate shape looks like? Lanceolate shape looks like this. It's typically like a flame shape. So generally it is a diplococci. Generally your gram staining, what do? If it is GPC, you draw like this, isn't it? If it is gram-positive cocci arranged in pairs. For strep pneumoniae, you have to draw like this. It is lanceolate shape, gram-positive cocci, lanceolate shape, and it is arranged in pairs. Clear? Then next you have Neisseria meningitidis. Neisseria meningitidis is what? Gram-negative cocci arranged in pairs. So otherwise we call it as diplococci. Whenever cocci is arranged in pair, we can call it as diplococci. Okay. Then next you have Haemophilus influenzae. Haemophilus influenzae has a typical characteristic in your gram staining. It is a pleomorphic organism. Okay. It is gram-negative coccobacilli capsulated, but it is pleomorphic. Who can tell me the meaning of pleomorphic? Various shapes and sizes. Okay. Then you have gram-negative bacilli. Examples are, I told you, Escherichia coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae. Then you have next Streptococcus agalacei. I told you it is gram-positive cocci arranged in short chains. Then the last but not the least, Listeria monocytogenes. It is gram-positive short bacilli. Okay. So in CSF, I told you we can do biochemical we can do cell count, then we send it for bacteriological. Other than that, we can do the antigen detection test. Okay, we centrifuge it and the supernatant is used for the antigen detection. Then we can do is latex agglutination test using the latex beads, using anticapsular antibodies. Then in pneumococcal meningitis, you can take the patient's urine for detection of C. polysaccharide antigen of the organism. It is done by the methodology immunochromatographic test. Clear? So urine for only which organism? Streptococcus pneumoniae. Okay. Then for culture, what are the agars we use? Blood and chocolate agar, of course. Along with that, one differential media, McConkey agar we use. Okay. So in certain cases, because it is CSF and the bacterial load can be very low, so it is very difficult for us to get the organism in the agar plates. Okay. So because of that, what do? In certain cases, we take the CSF and we inoculate in enriched media like blood culture bottles in the patient side, or we can use BHI. BHI is what? Brain heart infusion. Okay. Then we incubate it for 24 to 48 hours and then we plate it on the agars. Okay, so once we plate the agars, can you see this is a CO2 jar? So in the first and second picture, what is the difference? Tell me the difference. Both are almost same. Okay, yeah, flame is extinguished here. What happens is, once we plate the blood agar and chocolate agar, we take it and we put it in the CO2 jar. Okay, how do we get the 5% of carbon dioxide in this environment? We take it, we put it in a jar and then we put a tea light candle. Any candle we can put, and ideally your jar should be airtight and it should be transparent. Okay, then what happens? You light the candle, you lit it up, you put it inside and then you close the jar. Then after a few minutes, what do you see? It will the fire will extinguish. Okay, because why? It might have it has utilized all the oxygen. Okay, that's how you create the 5% carbon dioxide environment. Okay, so you don't put your McConkey agar in this CO2 jar, only for blood agars and chocolate agars. Okay, then once the organism grows, next what do you do? What is your next step? You identify the causative organism. How do? You do, what do we do? Gram stain. Very good. First thing first is your gram stain. After gram stain, what do? Biochemical reactions to identify. After that, your next step is, after biochemical reactions, what is your next step? AST, antimicrobial susceptible testing. Okay, so this is your traditional culture sensitivity testing. Then other than that, you can go for rapid diagnostics, diagnostic test also, for which the turnover time for the test is very less. For the traditional culture and sensitivity test, it takes around 48 hours to 32 hours to generate the report. Okay. So for rapid diagnostic tests, you can again go for antigen detection or molecular tests. Okay, so we can do antibodies to capsular antigens of meningococci can be detected by the methodology ELISA. Then you can study for the seroprevalence. The seroprevalence mainly we do it to look for the response of vaccination. It is not for diagnostic. Okay, so for molecular tests, we mainly go for multiplex PCR. In single run, we can detect multiple organisms. Okay, so that we don't waste our time, but it is very expensive. Each test might cost around 7,000 to 8,000. Okay, then next we can go for multiplex real-time PCR or biofilm array. So in molecular methods, obviously when you do, you have to target few things. Okay, so we target the genes of the organism. So few examples you should know. In meningococci, we target for CTRA gene. Then for your pneumococci, we target for LYT autolysin gene. For H flu, we target for the capsular gene like BEX-A. Okay, so mortality of pyogenic meningitis is very high. So treatment should be as soon as possible. Once you suspect the patient has pyogenic meningitis, you have to immediately start the treatment. So how do you start the treatment? When your AST report actually gets generated after 48 hours, 32 hours. Of course, you can't fast forward this time. So what do? First thing first, how you narrow down the diagnosis. First, how do you narrow down the diagnosis? One is your biochemical of the CSF to know whether it is pyogenic infection, viral infection or tubercular infection. Okay. Then second is the direct gram stain plays a huge role. So when you do the direct gram stain, you do see the organism there, at least the morphology of the organism, whether it is GPC or GNB or GPB or GNC. So you can narrow down. Then again, I told you about the patient demography, the age of the patient again plays a huge role. Then how do you narrow down more? You go for molecular tests. Molecular tests like multiplex PCR or biofilm array. In biofilm array, when once one organism is detected, suppose it has detected Escherichia coli, okay, then the further we can do is we can target certain genes to find out whether it is susceptible to certain antibiotics or not. Okay, that's how we can start the empirical therapy. And then one thing you have to always remember while starting the treatment of pyogenic meningitis, the antimicrobial whichever you're going to select should have good CSF penetration. It should cross the blood-brain barrier. That's how you should choose the drug of choice. Okay, so because in the initial few hours, you don't know what organism it is and you do have to start the treatment, you have to go for empirical therapy. For empirical therapy, you can, for adults, you can go for IV cefotaxime or ceftriaxone and vancomycin. Why? Because this all has GPC and GNB coverage. That's how you give empirical therapy to these patients. Okay, so if listeria is suspected, let me tell you, listeria is GPB. Okay, for that again you have to give IV penicillin in the regimen for coverage. Okay, see, your turnaround time for gram staining is hardly 5 to 10 minutes. You take the sample, you centrifuge it and you do gram staining. Immediately we can tell at least whether GPB is there or not. And certain times when we are doubtful and we know that it might be listeria, by seeing the clinical features and the demography of the patient, then we can add ampicillin in the empirical therapy. Okay. Then next, for neonates, we go for ampicillin and gentamicin therapy. And then IV dexamethasone is added in the regimen always to reduce the intracranial pressure. Okay. So definitive therapy, when do we start? After 48 hours, 32 to 48 hours, when the CST report comes back, then we can shift from empirical therapy to definitive therapy. Clear? So let's go individually, the agents of pyogenic meningitis. First, I told you Streptococcus pneumoniae. Otherwise, we can call it as pneumococci. Okay, this is one of the leading cause of pyogenic meningitis. It is seen in mainly adults more than 20 years of age. Okay, so how can it cause meningitis? Generally, this pneumococcus, it is present as commensal in the human nasopharynx. Okay, so how it can spread? If the patient gets otitis media, okay, from nasopharynx, the commensals can spread. Okay, or in cases of in cases of any invasive diseases as well. Okay, can you see? It is not your typical GPC. Your GPCs are more of spherical in shape. Can you see here? This, please look into this. The typical lanceolate shaped diplococci, the middle one. Okay, see. It is the typical lanceolate shape. When you see, you can actually identify it very clearly. See, it is not your typical spherical shaped gram-positive cocci. Okay, so you should know the, again, virulence factor. The virulence factors are capsular polysaccharides, C carbohydrate antigen pneumolysin and autolysin. So the risk factors I told you, otitis media, cases of otitis media, then alcoholism, diabetes, splenectomy, complement deficiency, okay, and in cases of head traumas as well. So you culture it, you plate it, then in blood plates, in the blood agar plates, you have to again appreciate the morphology of the organism. So what kind of colonies it produces? Alpha hemolytic. So alpha hemolytic looks like what? It gives the greenish tinge, the middle one. Okay. Then other than that, the another feature of the colony is described as Drotsman shaped or carom coin appearance. Can you see the edge is little bit elevated and the middle one is depressed? Can you see? Depressed center and elevated rim. So this is called as Drotsman shaped colony or carom coin appearance. Okay, then in biochemical identification, there are other streptococci also which will mimic like this with this kind of colonies. Okay, so because of that, we go for additional biochemical reactions. Okay, to confirm our findings. So one is it is bile soluble. Okay, then it ferments inulin and it is sensitive to optogene. Next, Neisseria meningitis. Neisseria meningitis, I told you what is it? It is gram-negative diplococci. Okay, it is capsulated. The typical feature of it is the adjacent sides of the organism, it is flattened. So it looks like lens-shaped or half-moon shaped. Can you see here? See, the adjacent sides are flattened. Okay. You know another species of Neisseria gonorrhea, it causes what? Gonorrhea. Okay. So other species of Neisseria, actually these are the commensals of your nasal cavity, oral cavity and genital tract as well, like Neisseria flava, mucosa, subflava. Okay. So the virulence factors are mainly the capsular polysaccharides. There are 13 serogroups. These are the majority of polysaccharides which will cause the invasive diseases like A, B, C, X, Y, W, 135. Okay. Why this virulence factor is important for you to remember? This one will play a huge role in the pathogenesis of the disease, and another one is you can actually target this for your diagnostic purposes, whether it is serological immunochromatography or whether it is your molecular diagnostic as well. Okay, so other virulence factors of these organisms are outer membrane protein, lipopolysaccharide, endotoxin, IgA protease, edesins. Okay, so how is the pattern of this meningococcal meningitis? It is generally sporadic infection. It can be your endemic, hyperendemic, or explosive epidemics. Okay, the highest prevalence you see it in sub-Saharan belt of Africa. Okay, the group A causes, it has the highest leading cases of epidemic meningitis worldwide, and group B and C currently is the major serotype in the invasive disease. So in India, mainly meningococcal meningitis, you see it as sporadic cases, okay? Every year during the winter and springtime, you see outbreaks of meningococcal meningitis, mainly in the northern part of the country, okay? The age groups has two peaks. One, you see it is in 3 months to 5 years of ages, then another you see it in higher prevalence in 15 to 25 years of age. So what are the risk factors that promotes the colonization of this organism? One is your overcrowding or semi-crowded places like schools, okay, military camps, then in refugee camps, then you see it among travelers like Hajj pilgrims, and then in Kumbh Mela. All these places you see higher risk factors to promote the colonization. Then smoking also huge role in this disease. Okay, the other risk factors are deficiency of the components like C5, C9, and then eculizumab therapy of it is again a terminal complement inhibitor, okay, and then hypogamma globulinemia. Source, only source is human, okay, no animals are involved. Mainly you see it in the nasopharyngeal carriers in cases of children's, okay. Mode of transmission is droplet inhalation. Most of your meningitis, pyogenic meningitis are droplet inhalation. Again, portal of entry is nasopharynx, okay. The spread of infection, hematogenous, then direct spread, or it can be through conjunctiva as well in Neisseria meningitis. It is very rare, but it can be. So in clinical features, mainly you see is non-blanching rashes, that is otherwise called as petechial or purpuric rashes. Okay, in 80% of the cases you will see this. Other than that, you can see septicemia. So when it turns into septicemia, what is your choice of sample then? Once the disease becomes septicemic, the person becomes septicemic, very good, blood culture. Okay, so this septicemia, it is generally endotoxin induced endothelial injury, okay. Because of this, there is increase in vascular permeability and intravascular thrombosis. Because of that, you see this petechial or purpuric rashes. Another important syndrome you see in this meningococcal meningitis is Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. This is because of the fulminant meningococcemia, okay. Here, what do you see is large purpuric rashes, shock, the patient can go into shock, the patient can have DIC, bilateral adrenal hemorrhages, and multi-organ failure. So, I told you the disease in children's generally they will present with the triad of the disease like fever, vomiting, and headache. In chronic cases, you can see because of repeated infection, there can be petechial rashes, fever, arthritis, and splenomegaly. Okay, in post-meningococcal reactive disease, which can be seen after 10 years of the infection as well, you can see complex immune will develop, and because of that, there will be arthritis, rashes, iritis, pericarditis. Okay, so how do you identify? I told you once after we do the gram staining, then we plate the organism. What kind of colony it is in blood agar? In blood agar, the only way we describe the colonies are whether it is hemolytic or non-hemolytic. So what kind of colony it is? Non-hemolytic. Okay, it is non-hemolytic colonies in the blood agar. Then what is it? It is already written. What it is? It is catalase test. So this is, the first one is slide catalase test. The second one is tube catalase test. Catalase test, what it is done with? What is the reagent used? This liquid, what it is? This reagent? Who can tell me? Without looking into books. What it is? It is hydrogen peroxide. Okay, we take the hydrogen peroxide and we mix it with the colony. Then immediately effervescence will be formed. If it is positive, you can see the effervescence, the bubbles will be formed. If it is negative, there will not be any changes. Okay, then the second one is oxidase test. Okay, in the oxidase paper, we add the colony. If it is positive, there will be color change. Blue color will be there. If there is no change, it will be negative. Okay, then other than that, the other added biochemical test we can do is we can go for sugar fermentation test. So this organism will ferment glucose and maltose, but it will not ferment sucrose. Okay, so the serotyping, how do we do serotyping? Get up. How do we do serotyping? We do slide agglutination test. Okay, so can you see here? What are the three things we do in any agglutination test, in any slide agglutination test? PC, NC and test. What is PC? PC is positive control. We see whether the test is valid or not. Then we go for negative control. Along with that, we add organism. The one where we add the organism is the test. Okay, so drug of choice for meningococcal meningitis is third generation cephalosporins. Okay, so earlier penicillin was given in this meningococcal cases, but because of the antibiotic abuse, in most of the cases has become penicillin resistant. So nowadays we go for third generation cephalosporins. Okay, so other than that, you have to give symptomatic treatment to the patient, like aggressive fluid resuscitation in cases where you can suspect of shock, and then it decreases intracranial pressure as well. Then you have to go for prophylaxis for those contact cases who has come in contact with the patients. Okay. So who are those? Those are household contacts who are directly exposed to the patient's oral secretions before the 7 days of first arrival of the symptom. Okay, so what do we give? We give ceftriaxone IM single dose. Okay, alternately, rifampicin or ciprofloxacin can be given, but rifampicin is not our choice of drug in these cases. Rifampicin is always reserved drug. Why is rifampicin reserved drug? It is anti-tubercular drug. Okay, always anti-tubercular drug is never our drug of choice in certain cases because we use it as a reserve drug. Once the person becomes resistant to rifampicin, suppose the person gets infected by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, that drug can never be used on the patient. Okay, so always certain drugs like linezolid, rifampicin, all these drugs we always keep it in the reserve drug for the patient. Okay, then again we can give for vaccine prophylaxis. One, we can use polysaccharide vaccine. The efficacy is 95% and duration of protection is 3 to 5 years. For whom do you give the vaccine prophylaxis? Again, for those the patients who came in contact with the cases of meningococcal meningitis during the outbreak, then cases with clinic dysfunctions, terminal complement deficiency, then who takes eculizumab therapy, then with laboratory staffs who are at risk of getting the disease during the outbreaks of the diseases, then international travelers. Okay, so thousands of this travelers, they travel during this Hajj pilgrimage and Kumbh Mela. So those cases should always be vaccinated. Okay. Then another thing we do is conjugated vaccine. So here what we do is we add protein carrier, which is also known as adjuvant. What does this adjuvant does? The adjuvant actually increases the immunogenicity of the capsular vaccine, and it is mainly given to the young children. Okay. So next is Haemophilus influenzae. Haemophilus influenzae is what? It is what it is? Gram negative. Huh? What was one character I told you just now? Pleomorphic. Okay. So the virulence factor for this is capsular polysaccharide. It acts by inhibiting the phagocytosis. Okay. So there are 6 capsular serotypes. The most common is serotype B, and it is one of the most virulent type, and it is responsible for your pneumonia as well as meningitis. Okay. So in CNS meningitis, CNS infections, the pyogenic meningitis, children less than 2 years are more susceptible of getting this Haemophilus influenzae pyogenic meningitis. Okay. It has higher mortality rate if it is untreated. What is it? Satellite. So you will see something like this in cases of Haemophilus influenzae for diagnosing it. So this is called satellitism. Okay. The center one, the long line which you are seeing, it is Staphylococcus aureus. Okay. So in cases of suspected Haemophilus influenzae, once the organism grows, what we do, we act in blood agar, we put a streak of Staphylococcus aureus, then side of it we streak the or isolate. Okay. So the isolates, the colonies will be bigger near the Staphylococcus aureus, then in the periphery the size will get smaller. Okay, this I'll tell you why. Okay, this is because this Haemophilus influenzae generally it grows near the X and V factor. Okay, so because of deficiency of this X and V factor, this organism will not grow in the blood agar. So what will happen in blood agar? In chocolate agar, do you think Staphylococcus aureus will grow? No? Yes or no? It will grow. Haemophilus influenzae will grow in chocolate agar, and in blood agar, will you think it will grow? Blood agar, do you think it will grow or not? Blood agar, will it grow? No. Why did we do satellitism in the blood agar? We needed Staphylococcus' help, isn't it, for the growth of Haemophilus influenzae. See, in blood agar it doesn't grow. So you needed Staphylococcus aureus' help for the growth of Haemophilus influenzae. So you will not see any growth of Haemophilus influenzae in blood agar. You will see the growth of chocolate agar because of presence of both factor X and V. Okay, then another biochemical identification test we do is with disc test for factor X and V. Okay, can you see here? This is factor X and V together. This is factor X, this is factor V. So in presence of factor X and V, the organism will grow. But in absence of either one of it, the organism will not grow. So both the factor X and V is present in chocolate agar. Clear? Still confused? Yes? So Haemophilus influenzae will it grow in blood agar? No, it will not grow in blood agar. What do you need in blood agar for the growth? You need Staphylococcus aureus. You need Staphylococcus aureus' help. So what do? You put a colony of Staphylococcus aureus, you streak it, then you streak the colonies, okay? The suspected Haemophilus colonies. The colonies will be bigger in size near the streak line of the Staphylococcus aureus, but then it will go smaller in the periphery. I'll show you how it looks like. Okay, blood agar. Then I'll streak the Staphylococcus aureus. Then I'll streak the suspected organism here. So the colonies near the Staphylococcus aureus will be bigger in size, okay? In periphery, it will get smaller because of the deficiency of the factors. Clear? So this is called as satellitism, which you see it in cases of Haemophilus influenzae. Okay. So other than that, the other biochemical tests you do is you look for the factor testing. In X and V, when you put the disc, we have three kinds of disc. One which comprises of factor X and V, another one is only factor X, the other one is factor V. Okay, we streak the organism in the agar, then we put all the three discs. So if there is growth near the factor X and V, it is Haemophilus influenzae. Near the factor X or the individual factor V, there will not be any growth. Clear? So what is the gram stain? It is pleomorphic. What is it? Gram negative or positive? Haemophilus. I'm asking about Haemophilus. I'm still asking about Haemophilus. Pleomorphic, gram negative, cocci or bacilli? Coccobacilli. It is coccobacilli. Always remember coccobacilli. Then next we have group B streptococcus, otherwise called as Streptococcus agalactiae. It is one of the major cause of neonatal sepsis. Okay, and one of the most highest prevalence of pyogenic meningitis in neonates. Okay, the gram staining is what? It is gram Streptococcus agalactiae. Gram positive. Gram positive? Huh? Gram positive? Gram positive cocci arranged in short chains. Okay, so you see early onset and late onset of meningitis in the neonates. If you see in the first week of life of the neonates, it is otherwise called as early onset of meningitis. Okay, then late onset occurs from 7 to 90 days of the birth. So these are the differences where you can differentiate whether it is early or late onset of the disease. Okay, I'll not go in details of this. How do you again identify the agalactiae? One, you do the gram staining. Then second, you plate it in the blood agar. In blood agar, what do you see? What kind of hemolysis is Streptococcus agalactiae? Alpha, beta, gamma. Beta hemolysis, very good. Okay, then other than that, we do additional biochemical reactions for the identification of the organism. One of the most important is CAM test. Can you see? So we streak the negative control organism, positive control organism, and the test perpendicular to the organism. The organism we use here is Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, so when you streak this organism, it should not touch the Staphylococcus aureus line. Okay, so what do you see here? What is it? Arrowhead. Presence of the arrowhead. What happens is when this organism comes close to the Staphylococcus aureus, there is enhanced hemolysis. There is certain thing called as enhanced hemolysis. Because of that, this arrowhead will be formed in the agar. Okay, it comes under which Lancefield group? In Streptococcus, we taught you about Lancefield group. Group B. Okay, so for here, the treatment of choice is penicillin. It is given for 14 days. I will cover this gram negative. Do I have time? Okay. In the next class, I'll cover these parts. Okay. Okay. Any doubt here? So, Haemophilus is little bit doubtful. Okay. You read about the Haemophilus influenza today. In the next class, I'll teach you again. Clear? See, there are two things you have to remember in biochemical reactions. One is chem test and the another one is satellitism. Okay, okay, thank you.